In the austere halls of the Los Angeles County Courthouse, where justice was supposed to be blind to all but the facts, Wesley Snipes stood facing an unexpected challenge. The acclaimed actor, known for his roles in Blade and White Men Can't Jump, wasn't there to defend himself against tax evasion or any of the typical celebrity legal troubles. Instead, he was about to engage in a battle over something far more personal: his right to wear a cross necklace in the courtroom. Judge Marcus Stanford, known for his strict interpretation of courtroom decorum, sat elevated at his bench, his black robes a symbol of authority that he wielded with unwavering confidence. The morning light streaming through the high windows cast harsh shadows across his face as he peered down at Snipes, who had been called to testify in a civil case involving a film production dispute. The courtroom itself was a study in traditional legal architecture: dark wood panels, the seal of justice prominently displayed, and rows of wooden benches filled with attorneys, defendants, and curious onlookers who had come to witness routine legal proceedings. None of them expected to see a constitutional debate unfold before their eyes. Snipes stood at the witness stand, his presence commanding despite the simple nature of his attire: a well-tailored black suit, white shirt, and most notably, a modest silver cross that hung from a chain around his neck. His expression remained composed, even as Judge Stanford's attention fixed upon the religious symbol with obvious disapproval. What the judge didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Wesley Snipes had spent the last several years not just acting in movies, but quietly studying constitutional law. His interest had been sparked during his previous legal challenges, leading him to develop a deep understanding of religious freedom and civil rights that would soon prove invaluable. The morning had started routinely enough. Snipes had arrived early, prepared to testify about contract details and production schedules. The cross he wore was the same one he'd had for years, a personal symbol of faith rather than a fashion statement. But as he took the oath, Judge Stanford's expression shifted from professional neutrality to clear disapproval. "Mr. Snipes," the judge began, his tone carrying the weight of authority, "in this courtroom, we maintain certain standards of secular decorum. That religious symbol you're wearing is inappropriate for these proceedings. You'll need to remove it before testifying." The gallery stirred slightly at this unusual demand. Religious symbols weren't typically banned from courtrooms, and several observers wore similar items of faith. But Stanford had a reputation for pushing the boundaries of his authority, particularly when celebrities were involved in his courtroom. Snipes's response was measured, his voice steady and respectful. "Your Honor, I wear this cross as an expression of my personal faith. I believe it's protected under the First Amendment." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that suggested deeper knowledge. Judge Stanford's face tightened almost imperceptibly. He was used to people immediately complying with his directives, not questioning them, even politely. "Mr. Snipes, this isn't a constitutional law debate. This is about maintaining the dignity and neutrality of this courtroom. Remove the cross, or you'll face a contempt fine." The tension in the courtroom rose palpably. The attorneys involved in the civil case exchanged uncertain glances, while the court reporter's fingers hovered over her keyboard, sensing the significance of what was unfolding. The gallery had grown completely silent, all attention focused on this unexpected confrontation. What happened next would demonstrate why it's dangerous to mistake an actor's profession for the limits of their knowledge. Snipes remained perfectly still, his composure unshaken. "Your Honor, with all due respect, I'd like to cite some relevant case law regarding religious expression in government buildings." The judge's expression darkened slightly. "Mr. Snipes, this isn't the time for amateur legal arguments. Remove the cross, or I will impose a fine for contempt of court." His tone suggested he expected immediate compliance, but something in Snipes's calm demeanor should have warned him that this wouldn't be a typical exchange. The actor's next words would set in motion a series of events that would be studied in law schools for years to come. "Your Honor, before you make that decision, you might want to consider the Supreme Court's ruling in Good News Club versus Milford Central School, which established that religious expression cannot be singled out for discrimination in government forums." A subtle shift occurred in the courtroom atmosphere. The attorneys present sat up straighter, suddenly more attentive. This wasn't just about a celebrity defying a judge's order. This was about to become a serious legal discussion about constitutional rights. Judge Stanford's confidence wavered slightly, though he tried to maintain his authoritative demeanor. "Mr. Snipes, are you suggesting you know more about constitutional law than this court?" The question was meant to be dismissive, but it would soon prove to be prophetic. The gallery watched as Snipes reached into his suit jacket and withdrew a small notebook. The action was smooth, practiced, as if he had been preparing for this moment. "Your Honor, I've documented several relevant precedents regarding religious expression in government buildings. Would you like me to share them?" The morning sun continued to stream through the high windows, now seeming to spotlight the confrontation unfolding below. The court officers stood uncertainly, unsure whether to intervene in what had become a legal debate rather than a simple matter of courtroom discipline. Judge Stanford found himself in an unexpected position. He had intended to assert his authority over a celebrity witness, but instead found himself facing someone who appeared to have a surprisingly deep understanding of constitutional law. His next words would determine whether this would escalate into a significant legal challenge or find a path to resolution. The tension in the courtroom had transformed from the usual nervous energy of legal proceedings into something more substantial, the quiet anticipation that precedes a moment of genuine significance. None of the observers could have known they were about to witness a masterclass in constitutional law from an unexpected source. As the judge prepared to respond, Snipes maintained his composed demeanor, the silver cross catching the morning light. This wasn't just about a piece of jewelry anymore. It was about to become a demonstration of how knowledge and preparation could transform a simple courtroom confrontation into a landmark moment in religious freedom cases. As Wesley Snipes opened his notebook, the courtroom fell into a silence so complete that the gentle rustle of paper seemed thunderous. Judge Stanford's earlier confidence had given way to a wary attention as the actor began what would become a masterclass in constitutional law. "Your Honor," Snipes began, his voice carrying the same calm authority he brought to his film roles, "I'd like to start with Cohen versus California, 1971. The Supreme Court established that wearing symbols as a form of expression is protected under the First Amendment. They specifically noted that the government cannot criminalize the peaceful expression of personal beliefs in public spaces." The judge shifted slightly in his seat, his expression tightening. "Mr. Snipes, this court has the authority to maintain appropriate decorum," but before he could finish, Snipes continued with his legal analysis, each word measured and precise. "Indeed, Your Honor. However, Capitol Square Review Board versus Panett, 1995, specifically addressed the display of religious symbols in government buildings. The court held that religious expression cannot be singled out for discrimination, even in government forums. Furthermore, he turned a page in his notebook. In Good News Club versus Milford Central School, 2001, the court emphasized that viewpoint discrimination against religious expression violates the First Amendment. The attorneys present exchanged impressed glances. This wasn't the rambling of someone who had done a quick internet search. This was a coherent, well-researched legal argument. The court reporter's fingers flew across her keyboard, capturing every word of what was quickly becoming a significant constitutional law discussion. Judge Stanford attempted to reassert control. "Mr. Snipes, while your research is impressive, this court has the authority to set standards for appearance and behavior." His tone suggested he was trying to find firm ground in increasingly uncertain territory. Snipes nodded respectfully before delivering his next point. "Your Honor, I direct your attention to Church of the Lukumi Babalu I versus City of Hialeah, 1993. The Supreme Court held that government actions targeting religious practices must meet strict scrutiny, the highest standard of constitutional review. Your order for me to remove my cross would need to serve a compelling government interest and be narrowly tailored to achieve that interest." The gallery watched as the judge's expression shifted from dismissive to concerned. Several law clerks in attendance had begun taking notes, recognizing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just about a cross necklace anymore. It was about fundamental constitutional principles. "Furthermore," Snipes continued, pulling out another document, "I have here a record of several witnesses who have appeared in this courtroom wearing religious symbols, including a Star of David, a hijab, and yes, other crosses, without being asked to remove them. This selective enforcement raises equal protection concerns under the 14th Amendment. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Stanford's face flushed slightly. Snipes had done his homework not just on the law, but on this specific court's practices. The actor's preparation was proving to be far more thorough than anyone had anticipated. In Employment Division v. Smith, 1990, Snipes proceeded, his voice remaining steady and respectful. The court established that while neutral, generally applicable laws may burden religious practice, laws that specifically target religious expression face strict scrutiny. Your Honor, may I ask if there is a written court policy regarding religious symbols? The judge's silence was telling. There was no such policy, and both he and Snipes knew it. The order to remove the cross had been arbitrary, based on personal preference rather than established law. But Snipes wasn't finished. He pulled out another document, a compilation of photographs from various court proceedings in this very courtroom. These public records show numerous instances of religious expression being permitted in this court. This suggests that today's order is not part of a neutral, generally applicable policy, but rather a specific targeting of religious expression. The legal professionals in the room couldn't help but be impressed. Snipes had built his case methodically, citing not just relevant precedents but also specific evidence of discriminatory enforcement. His argument was structured with the precision of an experienced constitutional lawyer. Judge Stanford, now visibly uncomfortable, attempted one last assertion of authority. Mr. Snipes, while your legal knowledge is unexpected, this court still has the discretion to maintain appropriate standards of dress and behavior. Snipes responded with what would become the most quoted line from the proceedings. Your Honor, the Constitution is not a matter of discretion. It's the supreme law of the land, and it explicitly protects religious expression from government discrimination. Would you like me to cite Marbury v. Madison on that point? The reference to one of the most fundamental Supreme Court cases, the one establishing judicial review itself, caused several attorneys in the gallery to suppress smiles. Snipes wasn't just arguing his point, he was demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of constitutional law that rivaled many practicing attorneys. Moreover, Snipes continued, I would direct the court's attention to West Virginia State Board of Education v. Barnett, 1943, where the Supreme Court held that compelling individuals to deny or hide their religious beliefs violates both the free exercise and free speech clauses of the First Amendment. The judge's earlier threat of a contempt fine now hung awkwardly in the air, exposed as legally unsupportable. The court officers, who had initially moved closer to Snipes when the confrontation began, had stepped back, recognizing that this was now a legitimate legal debate rather than a matter of courtroom security. Snipes then did something unexpected. He offered the judge a graceful way to resolve the situation. Your Honor, I understand the court's interest in maintaining appropriate decorum. However, I believe we can find a balance that respects both the dignity of these proceedings and the constitutional protections of religious expression. The gallery watched as Judge Stanford visibly weighed his options. The actor had presented a thoroughly researched, legally sound argument that would be difficult to dismiss. More importantly, if this became a formal constitutional challenge, the transcript would show that Snipes had provided a clear, cogent defense of his rights before any punitive action was taken. Perhaps, Snipes suggested diplomatically, we could focus on the civil case at hand, where I'm prepared to testify about the production matters in question. The Supreme Court has consistently held that incidental religious expression does not disrupt government proceedings or violate the Establishment Clause. The other attorneys in the room recognized what Snipes was doing, offering a face-saving way for the judge to back down while simultaneously reinforcing the legal strength of his position. It was the kind of nuanced legal maneuvering that demonstrated not just knowledge of the law, but understanding of human nature. The morning sun had climbed higher now, its light no longer harsh but illuminating, as if nature itself was acknowledging the clarity being brought to constitutional principles. The simple silver cross around Snipes's neck caught the light occasionally, a reminder of how seemingly small issues could raise fundamental questions about religious freedom and civil rights. As the judge prepared to respond, the courtroom remained suspended in anticipation. Whatever happened next would determine whether this would become a landmark case in religious freedom jurisprudence or a moment of judicial wisdom in recognizing when to correct course. The tension in the room had transformed from the initial confrontation over authority to something more substantive, a genuine legal discourse about the boundaries between judicial discretion and constitutional rights. Snipes stood calmly, his notebook still open, ready to continue his defense if necessary but clearly hoping for a reasonable resolution. Judge Stanford's response would be studied in law schools for years to come, not just for its content but for what it revealed about the intersection of authority and wisdom. The distinguished jurist, who had begun the morning confident in his power to regulate his courtroom, now found himself facing a choice between pride and principle. "Mr. Snipes," he began, his tone noticeably different from his earlier authoritative manner, "the court appreciates your thorough analysis of the constitutional implications at play here." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. It appears that what this court intended as a matter of decorum has indeed raised significant First Amendment concerns. The gallery watched as the judge, known for his rigid stance on courtroom protocol, began a careful retreat from his earlier position. The attorneys present recognized what was happening. This wasn't just a judge backing down. This was a moment of judicial wisdom in acknowledging when a position had been effectively challenged. Snipes maintained his respectful demeanor, understanding that this moment wasn't about victory but about establishing important principles. The silver cross caught the morning light as he stood ready to continue his legal defense if necessary, but his expression suggested he hoped for resolution rather than confrontation. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "your citation of relevant case law and evidence of disparate enforcement in this courtroom raises valid equal protection concerns." He shuffled some papers on his bench, perhaps more for composure than necessity. The court must acknowledge that a selective ban on religious expression would indeed fail to meet the strict scrutiny standard established in Church of the Lukumi Babaluai. The court reporter's fingers flew across her keyboard, capturing what was becoming a remarkable example of judicial self-correction. Law clerks in the gallery continued taking notes, recognizing that this exchange would likely appear in legal journals and constitutional law textbooks. "Moreover," Stanford added, showing that he too possessed deep legal knowledge, "your reference to West Virginia State Board of Education versus Barnett reminds this court of the fundamental principle that government cannot compel individuals to forsake or hide their religious beliefs without substantial justification." The atmosphere in the courtroom had transformed completely. What had begun as a confrontation over authority had evolved into a sophisticated legal discussion about constitutional rights and judicial discretion. The other participants in the civil case, momentarily forgotten, watched in amazement as their routine production dispute had become the backdrop for a significant constitutional law moment. Snipes took the opportunity to reinforce the broader implications of the moment. "Your Honor, if I may, this discussion demonstrates why it's crucial for citizens to understand their constitutional rights. The First Amendment isn't just words on paper, it's a living protection of our fundamental freedoms." The judge nodded, seemingly appreciating the actor's ability to elevate the discussion beyond their immediate conflict. "Mr. Snipes, the court must admit that your understanding of constitutional law is exceptional. Would you mind sharing how you developed such expertise?" What followed was a revelation that caused a stir in the legal community. Snipes explained how his previous legal challenges had sparked a deep interest in constitutional law. He described years of private study, consultations with legal scholars, and a genuine passion for understanding the foundations of American jurisprudence. "During my time in the entertainment industry," Snipes explained, "I've learned that preparation is everything. When it comes to constitutional rights, that preparation isn't just about memorizing cases, it's about understanding the principles that protect all citizens' freedoms." The judge's next words demonstrated why he had earned his position on the bench, despite his earlier misstep. "The court appreciates not just your legal knowledge, but the respectful and professional manner in which you've presented your argument. This demonstrates that advocacy can be both forceful and dignified." What happened next would be quoted in legal education seminars for years to come. Judge Stanford didn't just withdraw his demand about the cross. He used the moment to make a broader point about judicial responsibility and constitutional rights. Let the record reflect, he announced, that this court's earlier directive regarding Mr. Snipes's religious expression is withdrawn. Furthermore, let it be noted that this exchange serves as a valuable reminder that judicial authority must always be exercised within constitutional boundaries. The gallery stirred as the judge continued. The court would like to thank Mr. Snipes for bringing these important issues to our attention in such a scholarly and professional manner. His preparation and presentation would do credit to any member of the bar. Legal observers in the room recognized the significance of what they were witnessing. This wasn't just about a cross necklace anymore. It had become a moment of judicial accountability and constitutional affirmation. The judge's willingness to acknowledge and correct his error enhanced rather than diminished his authority. Snipes's response captured perfectly why this moment would be remembered. "Thank you, Your Honor." This demonstrates that our legal system works best when all participants, whether judges, attorneys, or citizens, remain mindful of constitutional principles. The impact of the exchange rippled through the courthouse immediately. Law clerks could be seen texting colleagues, knowing this would be discussed in legal circles by lunchtime. Court officers who had initially tensed for confrontation now stood more relaxed, some nodding in appreciation of the peaceful resolution. The attorneys involved in the original civil case exchanged glances, recognizing that their routine production dispute had become a footnote to a more significant legal event. Their clients, watching from the gallery, seemed equally impressed by the unexpected constitutional law seminar they had witnessed. As the proceedings prepared to return to the original civil matter, Judge Stanford made one final observation that would be quoted extensively in legal education contexts. Mr. Snipes has reminded us today that knowledge of our constitutional rights is not the exclusive province of judges and lawyers. When citizens understand and articulate their rights effectively, it strengthens our entire legal system. The morning sun had risen higher now, its light no longer creating harsh shadows but instead illuminating the courtroom evenly, as if nature itself was acknowledging the clarity that had been brought to constitutional principles. The simple silver cross around Snipes's neck caught the light occasionally, now a symbol not just of religious faith but of protected constitutional rights. The court reporter, who had captured every word of the exchange, would later remark that in all her years of service, she had never transcribed a more eloquent discussion of constitutional principles in a routine civil proceeding. The transcript would become required reading in several law schools' constitutional law courses. As the court prepared to return to the original case, the impact of what had transpired continued to resonate through the room. This wasn't just about a celebrity standing up to judicial overreach. It was about the importance of citizens understanding and being prepared to defend their constitutional rights. The legal professionals present recognized that they had witnessed something rare and valuable, a moment when the theoretical principles of constitutional law had been applied effectively in a real-world situation, leading not to conflict but to greater understanding and respect for legal principles. What had begun as a potentially contentious confrontation had transformed into a demonstration of how knowledge, preparation, and respectful advocacy could advance constitutional principles while maintaining the dignity of all involved. The morning's events would soon become a case study in effective constitutional advocacy and judicial wisdom. In the months and years following Wesley Snipes's remarkable constitutional defense in Judge Stanford's courtroom, the impact of their exchange continued to reshape both legal education and public understanding of religious freedom rights. What had begun as a simple dispute over a cross necklace had evolved into a watershed moment in constitutional advocacy. Law schools across the country incorporated the transcript into their constitutional law curriculum. Professors used the exchange to demonstrate not just the relevant legal principles, but the importance of thorough preparation and respectful advocacy. The way Snipes had presented his arguments, methodically building from fundamental principles to specific applications, became a model for effective legal reasoning. Judge Stanford's courtroom underwent its own transformation. The judge, influenced by the exchange, began incorporating more explicit constitutional analysis into his rulings. His handling of religious expression cases became notably more nuanced, and he often cited the Snipes incident as a turning point in his understanding of First Amendment principles. The legal community's response was equally significant. bar associations across the country developed new continuing education programs focused on religious freedom in public spaces. The Snipes standard became shorthand for thorough constitutional preparation, even in seemingly routine matters. 6 months after the incident, Snipes was invited to speak at several law schools. His lectures weren't just about his courtroom experience. They expanded into broader discussions about the importance of citizens understanding their constitutional rights. His unique perspective as an actor who had developed legal expertise brought new audiences to constitutional law discussions. The impact extended beyond legal circles. Religious freedom organizations began using the case as an example of effective advocacy. They developed educational programs teaching citizens how to articulate their rights clearly and respectfully, following Snipes' model of combining thorough knowledge with dignified presentation. 1 year later, Judge Stanford and Snipes appeared together at a constitutional law symposium. Their joint presentation became a powerful demonstration of how legal confrontations could lead to greater understanding. The judge openly discussed how the incident had changed his approach to religious expression cases, while Snipes shared insights about the importance of being prepared to defend one's rights. Law firms began incorporating the case into their training programs, not just for its legal principles but for its lessons about client advocacy. The way Snipes had offered the judge a graceful way to correct his position became a model for resolving legal conflicts constructively. The courthouse where the incident occurred saw its own changes. A subtle but significant shift occurred in how religious expression was handled. Court officers received additional training in constitutional rights, and new guidelines were developed ensuring consistent treatment of religious symbols and expression. The media's coverage of the incident evolved from initial sensationalism about a celebrity judge confrontation to more substantive analysis of constitutional principles. Journalists began consulting Snipes not just about his acting career but about legal matters, particularly those involving religious freedom and civil rights. 2 years after the incident, a legal journal published a comprehensive analysis of its impact. They found that citations of religious freedom precedents in lower courts had increased significantly, with many judges specifically referencing the Snipes case as an example of proper constitutional analysis. The incident's influence extended to law enforcement training. Police academies began incorporating lessons about religious expression rights into their curriculum, using the case to demonstrate the importance of understanding constitutional protections in day-to-day enforcement situations. Legal technology companies developed new research tools focused on religious freedom cases, with many using Snipes' methodical presentation as a model for organizing constitutional arguments. His step-by-step approach to building a legal defense became a template for legal research platforms. The actor's own career took an interesting turn. While continuing his entertainment work, Snipes began dedicating more time to legal education and advocacy. He developed a program teaching citizens about their constitutional rights, emphasizing the importance of knowledge and preparation in defending personal freedoms. 3 years later, when Judge Stanford retired, he cited the Snipes incident as one of the most significant moments of his career. Sometimes, he wrote in his retirement speech, "Our greatest learning comes when we're willing to acknowledge our mistakes and listen to unexpected teachers." The case's impact on legal education continued to grow. Law professors noted how the incident demonstrated the practical application of constitutional principles in real-world situations. The exchange became a favorite teaching tool, showing how theoretical knowledge could be effectively applied in unexpected situations. Professional organizations developed new guidelines for handling religious expression in various contexts. The Snipes Protocol became shorthand for approaching religious freedom issues with a combination of constitutional knowledge and practical wisdom. The courthouse where the incident occurred became something of a landmark in legal circles. Law students would visit to see where this remarkable exchange had taken place, some even sitting in the same gallery seats where observers had witnessed the transformation of a routine civil case into a constitutional law milestone. What made the case particularly valuable for legal education was how it combined multiple elements of effective advocacy, thorough preparation, respectful presentation, strategic thinking, and the ability to offer face-saving solutions to opponents. These elements became known as the 4 pillars of the Snipes strategy. The long-term impact on religious freedom cases was particularly noteworthy. Courts across the country became more careful in their handling of religious expression, often citing the Snipes case when analyzing whether restrictions on religious symbols met constitutional standards. Civil rights organizations began incorporating lessons from the case into their advocacy training. They emphasized how Snipes had demonstrated that effective advocacy didn't require confrontation or hostility. Knowledge, preparation, and respect could be more powerful tools. The case also influenced how celebrities approached legal matters. Rather than relying solely on their legal teams, more public figures began taking active roles in understanding the legal principles affecting their lives. Snipes had demonstrated that personal knowledge could be as valuable as hired expertise. Law enforcement agencies developed new training modules about religious expression rights, using the case to illustrate the importance of understanding constitutional protections. Officers were taught to recognize and respect religious symbols while maintaining appropriate security protocols. The impact on judicial training was equally significant. New judges received specific instruction about handling religious expression cases, with the Snipes incident serving as a case study in both what to avoid and how to handle constitutional challenges gracefully. As new challenges to religious freedom emerged, the principles established in the Snipes case continued to provide guidance. Courts and advocates regularly referenced how knowledge, preparation, and respect could transform potential conflicts into opportunities for constitutional affirmation. The legacy of that morning in Judge Stanford's courtroom went beyond legal precedent. It demonstrated how citizens who understand their rights and prepare to defend them respectfully can strengthen constitutional protections for everyone. It showed that effective advocacy doesn't require law degrees. It requires dedication to understanding and articulating constitutional principles. 5 years after the incident, when Snipes published a book about constitutional rights for citizens, the chapter about his courtroom exchange became required reading in civil rights courses. His approach to combining entertainment industry discipline with legal scholarship offered a unique perspective on constitutional advocacy. The story had become more than just a remarkable legal exchange. It had evolved into a testament to the power of knowledge, preparation, and respectful advocacy in defending constitutional rights. It reminded everyone that in a society governed by law, understanding and articulating one's rights effectively is as important as having them.